Ask for this kind of effort often.
But I'm asking...
No. I want it, I need it, and I'm going to get it.
I just want to let you know that that contract I told you about has come through. Now, I just finished sounding out Pete and Carl. They're going to see if they can do a job on it. What about you?
Are there any other advantages or disadvantages to this contract?
Sounds like we may have a deal here. That we should take the contract. Am I reading you right? That's right, Mr. Johnson. Your proposal's right here on my desk. Our company will give it priority attention, and I'll give you a definite answer by next Monday. Fine. Goodbye.
This is Jim Hewitt, a man responsible for giving leadership to his company. What effect will his choice of a leadership style have on morale, motivation, and teamwork? Which will help his people perform at their best?
I know what my first boss, Mr. Alton, would have done if he were here in my place. He would have moved fast.
Mr. Hewitt? Well, tell him this is Mr. Alton's secretary, and I want to be sure he gets the message personally. Thank you. Hello. Hello, Mr. Hewitt? Yes. This is Miss Harris. Mr. Alton wants to see you at 10:15 in the conference room. What's that? Yes, Mr. Hewitt, during the coffee break. No, I'm not at liberty to say what it's all about. I'm sorry. All he said was tell Hewitt I want to see him at 10:15.
Good morning, Miss Harris. What kind of a mood's he in today?
Well, he likes my new file setup,
Good.
but he criticized my desk.
Uh-oh. Well, we'd better be heads up today.
A little of Mr. Alton seems to have rubbed off on everyone. His personality can be felt in many ways, even in the attitude of his secretary. The men, it appears, have learned that the affairs of the day depend to a large degree on Mr. Alton's emotional condition of the moment, and that it pays to get a reading before the conference begins.
Morning, gentlemen. How's the coffee?
I was just thinking how good it was. Excellent. You know, if I had a little more notice of these conferences, I'd skip breakfast.
Well, I gather from the gourmet delights we have around here, we have bad news.
Now, there's a typical tech man for you. No, Jim, just the opposite. I've got good news. I suppose you gentlemen have heard the rumors about the new contract. Well, it came through. And if we can meet its requirements, as I know we can, our people will still be working when some of our competitors begin dropping employees like hot potatoes. Now, our company has always paid well, frequently above scale. Now, the company needs your help. I'm going to be calling on each one of you for some small sacrifice during the next 3 months in order to achieve a tremendous security for the future. And I know that's what our people want the most.
Just one question.
Go ahead.
I take it you're talking about stepping up the schedule.
Right.
If you say the job can be done, that's good enough for me.
Yes, I do.
Just outline my part of the operation, and I'll be ready to go.
Thank you, Peterson. I knew I could count on you.
You can count on me, too. But if we're going to be doing this job on top of our regular one, I'd like to know what you're going to expect in the way of quality.
There'll be no drop in quality. If any inferior parts get into the market, it'll hurt the reputation of the company. No, sir. There'll be no lowering of standards during this period.
But, sir, you're talking about stepping up our schedule, and we've only got so many inspectors. I think you know as well as I do that I'm not going to be able to inspect that many more items with the same size crew.
They can always do a little bit more. I know what speed these inspectors work at normally. I used to be one myself. And I say that we can all do a little bit better for a short period. Now, if necessary, I'll authorize some overtime. But I'm not going to give out a blank check. You'll have to justify every hour.
Well, that answers my questions.
Oh, now look, Jim. You men are going to have to trust me. That's all there is to it. Have I ever let you down before? Have I? Believe me, gentlemen, I know your problems. At one time or another, I've worked in every one of your departments.
Mr. Alton uses conferences to communicate his ideas, not to get information or a group decision. He knows just what he wants and how to get it done. The men are protected from making a wrong decision, and sole responsibility for failure must be Mr. Alton's.
Now, as I put the big picture together, it may mean hiring one or two loaders and moving a few men up. Perhaps a couple of those inspectors of yours, Menotti. If they're anything like I was, they're dying for a higher rate on the line. And I'd like to give a man a chance to improve himself. Now, Pete, I want you to hold down the overtime, but do what is necessary to get the job done.
Right.
Fortunately, gentlemen, this contract ends with the holidays. And I want you all to know, if everything goes right, I'm going to toss one fabulous shindig. There's one thing, however, that really would make me sore, and I want everybody to know this. This is a special contract calling for special measures, special efforts from everybody. It's a real challenge, and I'm not going to use the speed that we achieved during this period to set any new production standards.
That'll help.
One more thing. I don't expect to be questioned further on this by anybody. I give my word on it, and that should be good enough for the people who work for me.
What else is there to say?
I don't ask for this kind of effort often, but I'm asking for it now. I want it, I need it, and I'm going to get it.
Well, you can count on me. I'm with you.
Me too. Does anybody have any tobacco? Why is it whenever I need a smoke, I can never find any tobacco?
I think that'll be all, gentlemen.
Mr. Alton, obviously, is at this, the telling end of the scale. The division here between leader and group is clear and rigid. He keeps decisions, control, and information to himself because he does not get or want much participation from his men. To be successful, therefore, this kind of leader must have a very broad and diversified experience to support his decisions. What should Jim do? Should he handle this as Mr. Alton would?
Gentlemen, I called you together to inform you we're going ahead in that contract with General Products. I think it's a real step forward for our company. Now, I know it may put some strain on our facilities and manpower for a 6-week period, but I know we can do the job.
Well, I'm getting paid to take the responsibility, not to pass the buck, or take chances on anyone else's ability. And I wouldn't lose control. But would I be getting the best out of each man? I've got good people working here. They must have something that could contribute to this decision. And if I don't let them participate now, what about the long run? That's something my second boss, Mr. Demery, used to stress. He sure would have handled this differently.
You've had a chance to read, study, and discuss this contract with your people. As you know, the question is a very important one to our company. Now, we can use any of several alternatives on this contract. We can turn it down completely. We can subcontract. We can work overtime, add another shift, or possibly even step up our schedule. Now, I suggest we take out all the alternatives we can think of. Take them one by one, consider their feasibility.
I can see where the company will benefit by this contract, but what about us?
Well, you might think that way, Carl, but our interests are the same, aren't they? We could put the benefits in reserve for a rainy day.
Yeah, but we could also live without it.
What about our competition?
That's right. If we let it drop, our competitors will jump on it and push it through. They'll pick up the fast dough, and we'll end up kicking ourselves later.
Well, if we do take this job, my men feel that we might involve ourselves in lowering our standards. That sort of thing could backfire. These products will go out to the trade, just like our regular ones. That won't do our reputation any good. It might cost us more in prestige than it's worth.
Of course, pushing them through would mean a strain on the machines, more maintenance and repair costs, and more rejects. Is this new contract worth that? I wonder.
Well, I don't think in any case we want to hire a new ship for a 12-week contract. By the time we train them,
The deadline's come and gone. There seems to be an informal, permissive atmosphere here. As a matter of fact, it might be a little difficult to tell just who the leader is. Having set the stage, Mr. Demeter tries to stay out of the discussion as much as possible. He concentrates rather on clarifying, summarizing, and keeping the conference focused on the subject and the upcoming decision.
We put a lot of ideas on the table in the last few minutes. We're getting a good dollar on this deal. But certainly it wouldn't be worth very much if we ran into a serious quality drop, as Carl implies, or an excessive maintenance problem, Jim. Or lowering of morale, as Pete points out. Now, have we considered all the possibilities?
One of my men thinks he's got a couple of extra assembly machines he could put together with some baling wire. And if they're operated carefully, which means that Pete here could put a couple of his best men on it, well, it might speed things up a little.
Well, what about that, Pete? Is that a problem?
Well, that's no problem, but where are you going to get the trained people to run the other ones?
Well, a couple of my inspectors have been wanting a crack at your machines. They get kind of bored checking scratches and looking at gauges. They claim they can run those machines now. I'd like to see them get the break.
But if we take 2 inspectors away from you, how are you going to operate?
Well, I can get a hold of inspectors faster than Pete can get a hold of operators or Jim his maintenance men. I might even move a couple of traffic men into the breach and hire a couple of extra loaders. That way, every man gets a chance to improve himself. That should be good for morale. Some of my men have even suggested that they could break in the new ones. Of course, when it's all over, I want my men back.
Hey, what happens then? People don't want to move up then back.
Well, not if they're informed it's an emergency measure. Every man that's moved up gets extra dough and more training. So what can they lose?
Sounds like we may have an agreement here. That we should take the contract. Am I reading you right?
Well, Mr. Demeter is pretty far away from Mr. Alton, isn't he? Here, the group joins the leader in making the decision. And this time, there was a high degree of acceptance on the part of the men. It's interesting to note that with this style of leadership, the group is also more concerned about the effect the decision has on their subordinates. So, Jim has another alternative. He could let the men join him in making the decision.
This contract will have far-reaching effects on our company and our people. That's why I think we should try and do a careful job of considering all the angles of it, and try and come up with a decision that makes sense to all of us, or at least most of us.
If I do that, at least they would have to take the responsibility for it. But do they have the knowledge and experience to make the right decision? Do they really want the same things the company wants? Do I have the time to get everyone involved, keep them all informed? And the big question, would I want to go along with a decision I didn't believe in? That's something my next boss, Mr. Manning, would have found a way around. He probably would have begun with individuals, not the whole group.
Pete, I called you off the line because I have something important to discuss with you. You're the key man in this. The company has been offered a contract. It runs for a period of 3 months. If we accept it, we'll have to do it in addition to our regular work.
You mean it'll involve stepping up our production schedule?
I'm afraid so.
Oh, brother.
Can we do it?
Not without a lot of ulcers for everybody.
The company needs this contract as a cushion and has allotted a budget for it. So when the job is completed, there'll be a little salve for your ulcers. Say, a fourth of your salary for the period of the contract.
Well, that's fine. I may need a little special cooperation from a couple of my top operators.
Okay? Let them earn a little overtime. And if that's not enough of an inducement, why, give them a little time off. But only after the job is over. It's the only way I can justify it.
I don't know whether this will help you or not, but Jim's got a couple of machines, which I think with a little special rigging might hold up for 3 months.
Thanks. Where would we get the men to operate them?
Carl's department. He's got a couple of men who are anxious for a crack at a line job and the extra pay.
Oh, I see. Move them up and put on a couple of new loaders at the bottom. Excellent idea. Look, why don't I call a conference on this for this afternoon, say about 3 o'clock, and you can present your ideas to Carl and Jim. I have a feeling that Jim may be just a little sticky on this.
I think I know just what'll bring him around.
Mr. Manning feels it's important to have his people accept his decisions voluntarily. Accordingly, more than Jim's previous bosses, Mr. Manning knows his men and what is likely to influence each. He uses this knowledge to bargain and maneuver to get compliance. The men quickly follow his example and bargain with him and with each other.
I'll go to work on Carl in the meantime.
Mr. Minotti on line 1.
Thanks, Pete. That'll help a lot. I knew I could count on you. Hello, Carl. I just called to alert you to this new contract we've got. It's going to mean stepping up our schedule.
Pete'll hit the ceiling.
No, as a matter of fact, I just had Pete up here, and he seems to think that for a short time, the contract only runs 3 months, that he can handle the job.
Well, if we're prepared to lower our inspection standards, I think I could get by 2.
Well, I don't see why you should have to do that. If Pete can cut his share of the mustard, I don't know why you can't.
Well, it's possible, sir, but it depends on a lot of things, on the amount of overtime, or whether you're going to have to hire an extra shift, or...
Well, look, why don't we have a conference on it this afternoon, say about 3?
That's okay with me.
Good. Then you can give a little more thought as to how you think we can do the job. Maybe Pete and Jim will have some ideas for you and you for them.
That sounds fine.
Good boy, Carl. That'll really help me out. See you at 3. Sit down, Jim. I don't have a great deal of time on this, but I wanted to let you know that contract I talked to you about has come through. I just finished sounding out Pete and Carl. They're going to see what kind of a job they think we can do on it. Now, what about you? You going to have any problems that we should know about?
Well, if that much work's going to be added to the regular schedule, something's going to give. If not the men, then the machines.
Well, suppose we can take care of the men. What about the machines?
Depends on how fast you step up the schedule. Too fast, you're going to have a rash of breakdowns.
How much could we pick up without any serious trouble?
I wouldn't want to say. We're hitting pretty close to maximum right now.
Well, look, why don't we save this? I've called a meeting on it for 3. Now, you may be right, Jim. We may not want this contract at all, but, well, give it some thought. See you at 3.
In dealing with an individual, Mr. Manning may give the impression he is consulting him, when actually he is sounding him out to learn whether the person is for him or against him. He favors compromise to get the job done, but he retains full control of the decision-making process.
I warned you, Harold, from the very beginning that I might not go along with this new contract. And unless I hear some strong reasons to the contrary, I'm not likely to change.
You know the way I feel about these things, Jim. I could easily make this decision myself, but I'm willing to go along with how the majority of you feel. I hope you will, too.
Well, that's one thing about me, Harold, I think you know very well. I may fight you up and down the line, but once the decision is made, that's it. I'll work as hard as the next guy to make it come out right.
That's all I ask. Now, gentlemen, I hope this conference won't take too much of your time. You see, I spoke to Pete about this new contract, and he came up with some ideas that I think might be very valuable. I'd like to get your thinking on them. Pete, why don't you tell us about them?
Well, my first reaction to the new contracts was negative. Quite possibly like yours, Jim. But then I began to think about it, and I figured it would mean more money for our people around the holidays. As Hal said, it would be a bit of a cushion for the company. And since it's only for a short while, 3 months...
But you're talking about stepping up production, Pete. That's going to be rough on morale and machines.
Well, I know it isn't going to be easy, but I think we can do it.
Maybe we shouldn't turn this down without looking at every angle.
What about your men? Aren't they afraid of setting new standards? You know, once you work them this fast, they're going to think you expect them to do it all the time.
Oh, no, that is not going to be a problem, because the company has made it a practice not to set new production standards during any of these special rush projects.
And as far as the machines go, Jim, you've been wanting new machines, right? Well, I think now you can get them with no strain. And I'm sure the company would be willing to put on a couple of extra loaders in your department, Carl, and move everybody up.
Well, that'll help. I think we all agreed it would be a mistake to lower our standards.
Well, that just leaves you, Jim. What do you think? What do you say?
Well, I haven't changed my position any. But if that's the way all of you feel about it, I'll do what I can to help.
Thank you, Jim.
Now, I think if we really get behind Harold on this, we can do a bang-up job.
Mr. Manning's way of selling his decisions is through individual influence and group pressures. Other executives who use this style take a different approach, more openly reporting their decisions, the way in which they arrive at these decisions, and the benefits to those who will carry them out.
Gentlemen, I know with the holidays just 2 months away, many of our employees have considerable interest in earning a little extra income. This is one of the reasons which led me to take the new contract with General Products. This contract will not only enable us to keep a full production schedule for all our employees, it will also mean considerable overtime for them. If I do make the decision myself, it's especially important that I have the support of my people. But would the end justify the means? And would I keep that support over the long run? Maybe Mr. Connors, my last boss's style of leadership, is another way of providing direction and getting support. What would he have done?
Now, the purpose of this meeting, as you know,
is to explore the advantages and disadvantages of this contract. Now, I've sent each of you a summary of the most important points in the areas that concern you. Now, before I decide on this contract, I'm going to need as much input from you as possible.
Well, what do you want to do? You know what you're going up against as well as, if not better than we do, right?
I'm thinking of accepting this contract for several reasons. The first is the company needs it. If the economy should take a dip, we'd be in a better position to withstand the shock. But I'm wondering, if I do accept it, how you men are going to feel about it. It'll mean stepping up your schedule for about 12 weeks.
Just long enough to develop some fancy ulcers?
For what? What about quality control? You certainly don't expect us to lower our specs, do you?
Well, what about the equipment? Machines wear out a lot faster under stress. Is there enough money in the contracts to cover that?
Well, now, hold on. Just one shot at a time. Now, if I understand you, you'd like a little more money for your men and yourself, right,
Right.
Pete? But the job could be done. And you're suggesting, Carl, that I revise our specifications to allow for less severe testing, right?
Well, partly, but if we can figure a way that no one department suffers, I'll go along with the deal.
I see. And, Jim, you're going to suggest that by the time 12 weeks are out, we need some new machines, right?
Yeah, that's right. You better figure 3.
Even though the men know that Mr. Connors will make the final decision himself, they feel that they can influence that decision. They know he values their information and advice, that he is interested in the people who work for him and how his eventual decision will affect them. He has created an atmosphere where objections can be voiced, an environment of mutual trust where the men contribute freely. Now, does anyone have any other ideas?
Well, I always figured the best place to draw people from are in the company right here now.
Where?
Carl's department. It's easier to teach a man to be an inspector than an operator, and there are a lot of inspectors who'd like to crack at an operator's job and pick up some of the extra dough.
I see. It makes sense.
Well, that's fine. But where do I get the new inspectors?
The same place, from the ranks of the company. We could put on 2 or 3 new loaders and bring those other people up to better paying jobs.
Yeah, I could do that.
But we want them to understand that it was only temporary and that any overtime would have to be held down to the minimum to make the contract worthwhile. Now, are there any other advantages or disadvantages to this contract, or any problems that might come up that we've overlooked?
I can't think of any offhand.
Sounds good to me.
No. What about the men?
Well, I think they'd go along with it if we assure them no new production rates will be set during this period. But I'd want to do it right away. Get their cooperation. Be sure we had it from the beginning.
Fine. I'll take care of it. Now, there's just one other thing. What do you think would be a fair and reasonable salary increase for yourselves during this period?
Whatever you think.
Well, suppose I prorate your time on a straight hourly basis.
Fair enough. I'll buy that.
No time and a half.
Well, you are executives, you remember?
How could I forget?
By consulting his men, Mr. Connors seems to have created a high level of participation, a healthy climate, and a two-way flow of information. The decision has the support of the group, and control is consistent with the realities of the situation. Realities which always limit a man's choice of leadership style.
Now, I'll need all the information and ideas you men can give me, so I'll have a clear picture of what this contract will mean to our company and our employees. Now, I'm not asking you to make this decision. I'll make it myself. I'll take that responsibility. But I do want your thinking on all the aspects of this proposal. And I want your reactions to my thoughts.
Well, I guess I have to consider several things. The kind of outfit we have, the kind we want, the pressures of time, what I can expect from the group, even my own habits and inclinations.
But now, what should Jim do? Should he tell the group of his decision, like Mr. Alton? Should he decide himself and then try to sell his decision, pointing up how his subordinates and colleagues will benefit? Maybe he should consult his associates, test his ideas on them, and get their views before making his decision. Or should he join the group, contributing his ideas but giving equal weight to everyone else's as well? This, then, is Jim Hewitt, a man about to give leadership to his company. Which style should he choose? Which will develop the best climate in his organization? Which will provide the best balance between effective control and the meaningful involvement of his people? Which is best suited to the character of his group, to his own habits and inclinations, to the aims of his company, to the ever-changing conditions of the moment? Which will help his people perform at their best?